Richie Allen.
Okay, for the balance of the hour and into the next, if he'll stay with us, because I want to get him for a full hour, RichieAllenShow.com. Richie Allen, I was on his show, I guess, Monday, so I invited him on the broadcast, and here he is joining us today. You heard a lot of what I just threw out there. I don't want to get into the pedophile scandal, now confirmed. Your prime minister came out, of course, yesterday and said it's a national security issue. National security issue, the pedophile scandal, because it could bring down the government. So that's why they're covering it up. So joining us is Richie Allen. What would you like to get into first, Richie?
Well, Alex, first of all, thanks very much for having me on the program. You're an absolute inspiration, my friend. And to hear you talking about some of the issues there and putting facts on those stories and meat on the bones of those stories, you are an absolute humiliation to the mainstream media. I mean, you really are. You're talking about stuff. I mean, you are, and you don't need to be. I know you're a modest guy. But I've been watching and listening to your broadcasts for many, many years. I go back to watching you when you, I suppose, the famous time when you showed us what was going on at Bohemia Grove in California. And you're to be absolutely congratulated for that. And I think I said to you,
well, brother, you're to be congratulated launching your own cable station, reaching millions on mainline cable and syndicated radio, and succeeding, failing, succeeding. I mean, it's amazing. So you're my hero. That's why I don't want you saying I'm a hero, because all of us who are fighting against tyranny are just trying to survive and build a better world. So collectively, those of us that love life and humanity and fair play and have goodwill, we are basically God's sunshine in the world. So I'm just one more little ray of light with you, my brother.
Well, thanks very much, Alex. I mean, we can start anywhere. I mean, I loved listening to your monologue there. Let's talk for a minute, I suppose, about the historic paedophile sex abuse scandal, historic sex abuse allegations.
That you and David Icke and others exposed a long time ago, and is now, by the numbers, what David said, the exact people he claimed are being caught with the torture dungeons, the dead little kids, the royal family. I mean, this is over the top. Let's, and while he's talking, let's show some of those headlines. Go ahead.
Oh, it's terrible, Alex. You're absolutely right. David wrote a book in 1998 called The Biggest Secret. Again, you were to be commended because, you know, back in the early days, you had him on so many times talking about this. David Cameron, of course, is not talking about VIP paedophiles and members of parliament paedophiles and Elm Guest House and Dolphin Square. He's not talking about that. He's talking about Rochdale and Muslim paedophile rings and saying it's a national scandal and it's a national security, it's a dangerous national security problem. But of course, what he's not talking about are the allegations that are with the police, with Scotland Yard in London, with police forces all over England, the Dixon revelations, the Dixon dossier, which you've spoken about so many times on your programme, which, dozens and dozens of former MPs, even prime ministers, Alex, ministers have been named, names have been given to police forces around this country.
And for those that don't know, I mean, we're putting articles on screen. Everything you're saying has come out in major papers. That they're saying upwards of a third of Parliament, it looks like, is involved. I mean, this is a cult.
It's suspected, Alex. It's incredible. And one of the most staggering revelations that's come out, of course, in the last few months is that about the young boy, Vishal Mehrotra. I'm just looking to the left of my notes. I've not got anything written down, just a couple of bullet points there, because I don't want to get this wrong. But Vishal's father was a magistrate, so he was a judge. And he alleged that his son, by the way, Alex, he was 8 years old, and he disappeared on the day that Prince Charles married Lady Diana Spencer. That's when the boy disappeared. He was 8 years old. The father had a long and successful career as a magistrate. Now, you know all this, but maybe some of your listeners don't, some of your viewers don't. His father basically contends that his son was murdered, quite possibly at Elm Guest House, which is a guest house in London, which is frequented by VIPs, members of parliament, again, ministers. We're talking about the upper echelons of society for years and years and years. And that's a staggering thing. And in the Telegraph newspaper, in the last couple of days, you mentioned the Telegraph earlier on, they published another interview with the Vishambra. Yeah, it's Vishambra, is the boy's father, the 8-year-old boy. And it's absolutely staggering, Alex. And as you've reported on, to your credit, the British Home Secretary, Theresa May, is absolutely complicit in the cover-up of all of this, because she's put 2 chairs of this inquiry in what were their names again? The two chairs, Butler Sloss, Dame Butler Sloss, of course, the first one put in there, with ties to these people, with ties to the people who might very well be investigated, might very well be named in these documents. And of course, recently they've announced a woman from New Zealand, a judge called Lowell Goddard, all sorts of things coming out about her and her, I suppose, lack of credibility in taking on this inquiry. She's gone on the record to say it might take 5 years, Alex. How convenient that is, that it might take 5 years before we get to the bottom of all of this.
Well, that's right. And then we've also seen, speaking of Australia, but also in the UK and the US and Canada, we've seen now liberal judges, close quote, saying, hey, pedophilia is just a choice and children can love too. Classic NAMBLA statements now trying to legitimize sex with children. I mean, they're actually starting to come out of their pedophile closet.
It's unbelievable, Alex, when you hear stuff like that. I mean, from talking to me over the years, there's no hiding it. I'm an Irishman. I grew up with this in Waterford City in the Republic of Ireland. I grew up with it. And a great friend of mine who won't mind being named, Derek Power. Derek was destroyed as a young boy by a bishop in County Waterford, a guy called Smith, who ended up dying in prison. We know in Ireland, Alex, that the then Cardinal Ratzinger, who went on to become Pope Benedict, was ringing up, and bear with me, I know I might be going on a tangent, but there's a reason.
No, get into the Vatican, get into all of it. I mean, this is sick.
It's sick stuff. We know that Ratzinger was phoning bishops in Dublin, in Cork, in Limerick, in Kerry, all over Ireland, to tell those bishops, look, we know in the Vatican, we know that there's crazy stuff going on in Ireland, that priests and Christian brothers are buggering and raping and destroying children. But don't ever cooperate with the police. We have this on the record. That lousy, I'm not going to swear and use bad language on your program, but before he became Pope, he was complicit, Alex. He was an accessory after the fact, because he was telling bishops, move those priests to other parishes.
And that's why they reportedly helicoptered him off to that Italian castle, was these documents were starting to come out.
Absolutely right. There's a man, Alex, who's going to be in hiding for the rest of his life, will never leave the Vatican City, because there's that much anger and outrage in Catholic communities around the world. And we see it playing out here. One of the things I loved you talking about over the years on your shows was the Franklin Credit Union scandal and Lawrence C. King. Alex, it's playing out here now in England, in London, in Manchester, in Birmingham. We know that, Scotland Yard have admitted. In fact, I've interviewed Michael Shrimpton, who's been a guest on your program before, a barrister and a guy who's been connected up to the gills with the security services in Britain. He's gone on the record to say that, Edward Heath, former Prime Minister of this country, molested children. People will say it's a cheap thing for me to say now because Heath is dead and it's easy to say something about the dead. But former MI5 officers, Scotland Yard detectives have been talking amongst themselves and have been letting little bits of information slip out to journalists like you, journalists like me, to say that children were murdered, not necessarily on the orders of people like Ted Heath, but they were murdered by the security services in case they ever dared to tell a policeman or woman about what.
Because again, once the pedophiles do a big enough crime and they're a government official, the rest of the government who isn't involved has to cover it up, because the view is it would bring down the whole government. But see, long term, it just lets this stuff breed, and then it will end up bringing down everything 10 times worse because they protected it.
That's absolutely right, Alex. It's absolutely right. I've said before, I loved hearing you at the beginning of the program saying it's a great time to be alive, because I think you're absolutely right to say that. I have this thing, I'm an eternal optimist like you. I have this thing in my gut where I believe that this is going to be one of the great catalysts in bringing down this evil, horrible, sickening cabal that you so eloquently described at the beginning of the broadcast. Because, Alex, when and I'm an ordinary man, you're an ordinary man, but so many of the people that we share our lives with, so many of our neighbours, and you've got children in school, some of the parents of the children that your kids go to school with, they don't want to hear this, Alex. They don't want to hear you talk about it. They don't want to hear me talk about it.
Out of sight, out of mind, but children are being disappeared by the tens of thousands per country into sex slavery, into snuff films. It's being covered up. We need to tell people that don't want to hear about it that they are now becoming complicit and aiding and abetting these shadowy rings. From your deep research, we've gone over some of the evidence, some of the big stories with this happening. From your research, And I mean, Jimmy Savile, the top BBC host, who had the highest level security clearance with the royal family, can come and go at night, best friends with Prince Charles, found with torture dungeons, dead little kids, necrophilia, everything the kids have said now coming out. A bunch of his friends end up dying. Drivers end up dying. Butlers end up dying. You know, anybody blowing the whistle ends up dying. You see this guy in his weird jumpsuits, the archetype of a pervert weirdo, and then this is the confidant of the royal family. They're constantly finding dead children's bodies buried on royal estates. What is going on? What is at the top? In your gut, how deep does this go, and what's their end game?
In my gut, I've never said this, Alex. Well, I have. I've said it on my own program. In my gut, I believe, not because he's a friend of mine, but because I believe my credibility, your integrity and my integrity is too important. Not because he's a mate of mine, but I'll tell you, I think David Icke is absolutely spot on. It goes to the heart of royalty in this country. It's prime ministers, like we said earlier on, justice ministers. It's satanic, Alex. I absolutely believe that much of this is satanic. And when I think about that, I think back to that exposure that you brought out all those years ago of what was going on at Bohemia Grove. It just all adds up, you know. David talks about dot connecting. You connect the dots on your program. I'll tell you what sickens me, Alex. You know what they're doing here in England now? Your viewers, I know your producers and you will be aware of a woman called Melanie Shaw. Melanie is from Nottingham. You know what they're doing to Melanie all the time, Alex? They're locking her up on stupid charges because Melanie was abused at a children's home in Nottingham many, many, many years ago. And in the last few years, she gave evidence to the police in Nottingham and the police in Britain, in wider Britain. And nothing was done about the evidence that Melanie gave. So what did she start doing then? She's a very feisty woman. She started screaming from the rooftops and shouting about the fact that, my evidence isn't being taken seriously. Why have people not been at least interviewed under caution, even if not arrested? Well, they've just banged her up for the second time recently, Alex, on a load of trumped up charges with no evidence. They've accused her of threatening her neighbours, of harassing her neighbours, of attempting to burn her garden, her neighbour's garden shed. Alex, they're locking them up. We live in this disgraceful world that you've been doing your utmost for years to shine a light on, where the lousy bastards, and I'm sorry for saying that word on your program, who did this are walking around, they're driving Bentleys, they're writing laws and legislations, they're eating caviar tonight, and the people that were abused by them, Alex, they're getting locked up for telling the truth. They're locking them up on trumped up charges. And your producers will know they can just, they can Google Melanie Shaw and find out what's been happening to her. And it's so terrible, Alex. It's never happened to me, thank God. And I don't know anybody, apart from my great friend Derek Perrin in Waterford, but I don't know anybody in England whom it's happened to. But to have that absolute reality that we have, where the victims are being locked up and the people who did it are walking around. And I'll just go back to say one final thing on it. I believe, and the reason why I mentioned, the ordinary men and women who think this is beyond the pale, when this all comes out, Alex, those people are going to finally have to face up to what their leaders are doing and what's behind their leaders, the hidden hand. They're going to have to face up to it, Alex. And then many of the other issues that you've been revealing on your program for years, whether it's about 9/11, whether it's about central banks and what they're doing and trade agreements and all of that, people will start to realise that. So I think this might be a watershed moment in Britain where people are finally going to see who these people are.
Oh, I agree. And we're going to see more and more of these watershed moments across the board. Richie Allen's our guest. Alex Jones Show, if you just tuned in, we're going to give the number out in a moment and take your calls coming up if we cover some geopolitical issues. But Richie, that was my next question, and then you started covering it without me asking it. Just like the Vatican for 30 years denied that they had pedophile rings throughout the organization from the bottom to the top, it turned out it was worse than what the victims were even saying in almost every case. Then expanding on that, they were not able, despite all the king's horses and all the king's men to cover it up. The UK's not able. The Germany's not able. The Netherlands aren't able. Brazil's not able. But a bigger question is, what happens as all these groups end up getting brought down, A, and then B, why is it pedophile rings running things? I mean, I just have no perception, no kinship with these people of how they would be attracted to children. But going beyond having sex with children, which I have zero attraction to and have a repulsion to, I really have a repulsion to hurting them. I mean, when I think about somebody hurting a child, I'll be honest. I want to kill people. And I'm not saying I'm a tough guy, but I'm like an average man. I mean, I can get superhuman strength when somebody's messing with my kids. And, I mean, if I caught somebody hurting my kids, you know, the cops aren't coming. I'm going to come after you. And no wonder they want our guns, Richie. No wonder they want a police state total grid in place that they control to protect them from us, because they're scared all this is going to come out, because they know everything hidden ends up coming out. So when we come back, I want to ask you those questions. A, why is it pedophile rings? What are these psychic vampires? I mean, what's going on? Why torture them? Why was it Satanism? I mean, it turns out in all these cases that are confirmed, a huge nest of pedophiles at the BBC, that it's Satanism. So we're going to talk about this when we come back. There's a lot of children worldwide that are having their darkest hour right now with big, fat, disgusting-looking demon pedophiles raping and torturing them, like Jimmy Savile, who's gone on to hell. You got to Google that guy's name and read all the news articles about the torture dungeons, the dead bodies, the Satanism. And, of course, it was all done through Child Protective Services. They would get the at-risk children, just like Penn State, where Jerry Sandusky would rape young children in the locker room showers on Saturday at high noon. A major football field house is like a anthill on a Saturday or a Sunday, ladies and gentlemen. Just going to give you a news flash. You know, that's my problem, is I've got too much evidence and too much proof of this. It just makes my head swim. And I know why people deny it and don't want to look at it, because it's so alien to a normal person. I mean, I see Marilyn Monroe and I get excited. But not even so much sexually. It's just she's so beautiful. She's got so much life. I just love women. That's God made me that way. That's normal. It's not bad that I'm attracted to women. I mean, we have children. That's how we procreate. Men and women go together like a horse and carriage. But I just cannot, and I see women of every race, color, and creed and see so much beauty in them. But I see children, and all I want to do is protect them. And they're so sweet and so innocent, and I want to teach them. Well, that's what God wants. God gives us blessings and freedom and delivers us from our enemies. But God needs us to stand up and be his messengers, to be his emissaries, to be his foot soldiers, and to challenge these dragons and to deal with them and to take them down and just to say, you know what? I don't care if you demonize me. I don't care if you attack me. You know what? I don't care if you kill me. Because somebody's got to stand up for these children. And that's why I don't want people calling in saying I'm a hero or Richie Allen's a hero or anybody else is. Listen, it's a normal behavior when you know systematic evil's going on to stand up against it and say it's wrong. Like, I think the Palestinians are treated wrong. I think that they're abused. I think that they are living in hell. And a lot of innocent children get killed. But I pull back and I go, why does the left only focus on a few hundred Palestinian kids killed a year, which is terrible, and not hundreds of thousands of Christians, many of them children killed by al-Qaeda forces that our government funded? Oh, because they don't count. See, I look at when I'm told to get upset. When a bus gets blown up and Jewish kids get killed, I'm told not to care. Or when Israel in the 50s and 60s irradiated 110,000 children in a secret declassified program, the ringworm children, turned out that they killed about 10,000 of them. You don't hear anybody that speaks up against the Holocaust saying that's wrong. Well, because, oh, it was a racist, eugenicist, Jewish Holocaust against Jews. Because within that ringworm child story that's aired on PBS, public stations in Israel, I mean, it's declassified as of 1987. You get a microcosm of, oh, this leadership aren't Jews. This leadership are eugenicists. At least some of them are. Just like England, just like Germany, just like Russia. It's the same group, the same people. I don't care if you're a Chinese eugenicist or a Jewish eugenicist or a German eugenicist or a Mexican eugenicist. Did you know eugenics was more popular in Mexico than even in Germany in 1938? Look it up. I just know too much is the problem. I just know the enemy. I know their game plan. I know how bad they are, even though my flesh repels from them, and I can't believe they're that bad. I do know they're that bad. I've read a lot of crime reports and a lot of criminology books back when I had time to do so in high school and college, and the descriptions of the police psychologists when they go down in these basements with the police and they dig up 10, 15, 20, 30 bodies, and usually it's little kids or women's skeletons or rotting bodies, and they look at the photos and the videos that never get released to the public of these psychos torturing these kids and stuff. And, I mean, people get PTSD, they vomit, they have mental breakdowns, the detectives that have to watch this stuff. Because by law, they've got to watch it all for the court, and they just can't even look at it. And I'm not saying I'm a victim, but if anything, if I do deserve your prayers and support for anything, it's that I have to constantly think about these people, and I have to constantly be aware of what they're doing, and I have to constantly be aware the enemy is on the march right now, like Battle of the Bulge, to counter everybody that hates them. And that if people would just grow up and admit how bad the globalists are, we could roll back this tide of evil. But the only reason there's an awakening happening right now is because evil is swinging from the lampshades. It's swinging from the chandeliers. I mean, it is growing so fast. In my spirit, I feel the evil growing. In my gut, I feel it. But intellectually, I see it, and it makes me want to throw up. Richie Allen's our guest. He'll be with us 20 minutes the next hour to take your calls. The toll-free number to join us is 800-259-9231, 800-259-9231. On any of the subjects we've raised, I want to get into Lord Rothschild warns investors of most dangerous geopolitical situations since World War II and tie that into just how wealthy and powerful the Rothschilds are. I want to get into how that ties into China has announced plans for a world currency. Those stories are all up at Infowars.com right now. Obama moves without Republicans blocking him with a blank check to set up Homeland Security as a public illegal alien importation agency. That's all here in front of me right now. And next hour, I'll play some clips of the White House press secretary, the spokesman, getting grilled about Hillary and her secret email accounts that violate the Open Records Act, and that she was asked if she had other accounts and lied. She's perjured herself. We'll see if she gets in trouble for that. But we'll discuss it. 800-259-9231. 800-259-9231. RichieAllenShow.com is his website. Twitter, follow him at Richie Allen Show. Follow me, Alex Jones, at Real Alex Jones on Twitter. And Richie, I should have asked you during the break, are you game to stay with us a half hour or 20 minutes in the next hour?
Yeah, we can do that, Alex. Yeah, I go live in about an hour and 15 minutes. But yeah, of course, I'd be delighted to stay a bit longer. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. We'll just get you warmed up because I can segue with news and calls and then make sure we cover the entire waterfront with Richie Allen, who joins us. We can go to calls from Stefan, Matt, Mama, Michael, Cranky, Canadian first, or do you want to hit some more news before we go to calls?
Yeah, you're the boss, Alex. Whatever. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, let's do this. Let's put bookends on the whole pedophile cult, because I asked that question earlier. A, why is this, it seemed historically, the dominant vampiric, social, Darwinist, what's the word, psychic vampire group all over the world, and why can't we ever unseat them? And how do we awaken humanity? But as it seems humanity is starting to awaken, how do you expect them to strike back? So 3 questions there.
I'll tell you what, Alex, one of the things, you'll be aware of this because you've interviewed and chatted with David Icke probably more than anybody. David has always said that he believes that what might be involved here is energies that are known as archons or are known as the jinn, all these ancient beliefs. Demons. Now, I used to laugh at this one time. I used to think, well, this is kind of extraordinary. It's a little bit beyond the pale for me. I'm not going to buy into it. And that was without disrespecting David. I just found it was a little bit difficult to take. But not anymore, Alex. You know, the more I think about it, the more satanic in nature we find these things to be. I didn't mention that Harvey Procter is a former Conservative MP. He's been arrested in relation to alleged paedophile activities at Dolphin Square in London. And for your viewers who don't know, Dolphin Square was like a big, not a frat house, but a big apartment block where a lot of politicians would have stayed and lived in while they were working in London. So they've arrested a former Conservative MP. Because we're learning about the satanic nature of this stuff, David has got to have a point, and it's well worth exploring that what they're after is the prepubescent energy of young children. And do you know what, Alex? I'm going to say this. I'm going to say that that's as logical a conclusion as anybody has drawn on that for me. Because,
well, sure, every ancient culture, just to back you up, sacrificed children for their energy and believed they were doing it for entities.
Yes, and you mentioned earlier on that this is thousands. We're not talking about a few hundred children over a 30 or 40 or 50-year period. We're talking about maybe tens of thousands.
So we're talking about satanic forces on the earth harvesting the life force and the terror energy of children.
Now, do you know what, Alex? When I say that and when you say that, some of our viewers will be very disturbed and they will say that we're trying to give the paedophiles a pass, because what we're trying to say is, God love those paedophiles. It's not their fault, really. It's the demons. We're not saying that at all. You know, we're not saying that at all. I mean, you can invite these things.
But why do so many of the pedophiles believe they're doing it for demons? That just keeps happening and happening and happening. So regardless, it's an archetype of a demon that's manifesting if you go with the Carl Jung psychology.
Yeah, and there's probably so many different levels to it, Alex. You know, there are people who are induced into it maybe and are compromised. I mean, there's so many different levels. I mean, there's having sex. I hate to even say this. I mean, you're a dad. I'm not a dad yet. It must be terrible for you to talk about this sort of stuff. But having sex with a 7 or an 8-year-old boy or girl. But then there's having sex with a 13 or 14-year-old girl, which is no less wrong. It's completely and utterly wrong. But quite often, you know, famous people, politicians were induced into doing that so that they could be later compromised, you know, when they were needed to do something. Or
exactly. You don't get in the club, even if you're not demon-possessed or whatever it is. You don't get it unless you go out with a 16-year-old girl, so they then know you're compromised. In fact, that's almost a gang ritual. It's come out to get into these globalist groups is, hey, just 16-year-old girl, we'll know you're safe once we've compromised you. And these politicians will even pose and take photos knowing they're being inducted like a gang ritual where they tell a gang member, go shoot an old lady or go shoot a cop or go rob a liquor store and shoot the clerk. That's what the, you know, different racial gangs do. With this gang, it's rape children. But then when you get deeper into it, you're literally cutting the hearts out of babies.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we mentioned briefly earlier on Lawrence E. King, you know, Republican power broker, big friend of, you know, famous Republicans back in the 80s and what he was getting up to. And of course, one of the things he was doing was deliberately compromising people who might become enemies, you know, people who might block certain things or might make things difficult. And they were at that, taking the kids out of, I think it was it Boys Town Orphanage, Alex? Was that the orphanage?
Absolutely. And I remember having Senator DeCamp on, who was a commando in Vietnam and CIA that exposed all this. He started talking about Boys Town, and then he started talking about Penn State like 10 years ago. And I actually delayed him and said, you know, cut him off the air and said, you can't talk about stuff that hasn't come out in the news. And DeCamp got mad at me. I apologized to him later. But I got to say, I mean, he knew what he was saying. I mean, that is verified right there. Just like David Icke said, this prime minister raped kids, and now that's coming out. Or Jimmy Savile, the BBC, and these people, you know, had secret rooms and satanic rituals. And then everything Icke said came out. And so, you know, and Icke learns all this in a vision without drugs in Peru. I mean, it just gets weirder and weirder.
You know, there's a video we haven't mentioned, and it's doing the rounds of the internet. I've interviewed somebody connected with it, but I made sure they didn't mention any names. And it's a video that everybody's seeing of 2 young children in Hampstead in London appearing to describe ritualistic child abuse and murder. And as of yet, Alex, I don't know whether the video is a hoax, whether it's real. I've spoken with a woman called Sabina McNeil who believes that it's absolutely real. The children are in care now. They've been taken from their mother by the authorities in this country. And I just don't know, Alex. But what I do know is that that's gone on. You know, ritualistic child murder has gone on here on a huge
Absolutely.
scale.
And then they use things like the Salem witch trials to discredit it and claim that it's always made up hysteria. No, it's not. It's being proven and it's going on at the highest levels. We'll be back with your phone calls and Richie Allen. I'm Alex Jones. Stay with us, Infowars.com. But if we're going to protect the little guys, the children, as Christ commanded us to do, stop for the little ones to come into you. Be better to tie a millstone around your neck and throw it to the deepest ocean than to hurt one of these. Well, if we don't stand up for them, we are aiding and abetting the sickos. Our guest is Richie Allen. We're going to your phone calls right now. Let's go ahead and go to Stefan in New York. Thanks for holding. You're on the air worldwide.
Hey, how you doing? And how are you doing, Richie?
I'm very well, Stefan. Thank you.
Good. The whole thing with these pedophiles, I mean, I don't want to get onto this too much because, I mean, these are just a bunch of sickos. I believe once you get to a certain point with your money, you really feel that you can do anything and you can get into whatever temptation, you want to get into, especially if...
So you're saying they're so rich and so powerful, they get into what's forbidden regardless.
Yeah, they get into what's forbidden regardless. And then when you see these people with their arms around them, taking pictures with them, they're just playing the game. They understand, listen, these are what these sickos are into, but this guy's got X amount of money and he's going to help me with, corrupting Iran to, do whatever. Point is, I believe that these are just sick people that have been in power for too long. It's usually always the traditional money families, like, for instance, like the Rothschilds. They're very into all these demonic things. And I believe these people, they might have got scriptures that are, God knows how old, that might have told them, the blood of children do this. And so they get high off that. And then that's like their next hobby. You know what I mean? These people's hobbies, they're so warped with their money that their hobbies just become something, like as extreme as this, as saying, you know what, let's try this whole, blood sacrificing thing with children. And it seems we can absorb energy from it. So then they just go along with it.
Sure.
And unfortunately.
Sure, but you wanted to get into Rothschilds and Hillary Clinton because you volunteered that. I see it on screen. I want to get into the Rothschilds, too. I'll get into it more in the next hour. But what was your point about Lord Rothschild, the head guy, saying the most dangerous time, geopolitical situation since World War II?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel right there, he's giving us a heads up, but even the people that are in his closest circle, they already know what's going on. This is kind of like a message to people that he can't really reach, directly. So he'll give these little things out, like, oh, listen, there's going to be financial collapse, as like a heads up to his other business buddies that might.
Sure, and we're getting more and more of those heads up. It's like the head of the Federal Reserve, 10 years ago, Greenspan, saying irrational exuberance will bring us down when they set up the whole system to collapse down the road. I think that's a really great point. What's your point on Hillary Clinton?
And my point on Hillary Clinton is obviously she's in, collaboration with all these heads, as obvious as it looks. I mean, she has a secret email address. I mean, come on, that's a dead giveaway that she's obviously doing some sort of, discreet...
Sure, it violates federal law, too, and this woman's a monster. She's to be indicted. We're going to break. We're going to come back with more calls. Richie Allen, your comment on what he just brought up with the Rothschilds.
Oh, well, look, I mean, this guy stands to, fund both sides of every war in recent history. He knows the score, of course. Much of what happens and what will happen in the coming months, he'll have his grubby paw prints and his fingerprints all over it, Alex. There's very little I can add to anything that's been said about Rothschild and the Rothschild dynasty and their central banks, other than it's pure evil in its purest form, I think.
You're Irish, but it's happened to everybody. But, boy, I tell you, the takeover of Ireland has been really sad, but I see a lot of people getting upset about the globalists looting your country. Let's briefly talk about Greece and how that ties into Ukraine, Ireland, Spain, and more. What it's like to be conquered by bankers. You finally kick the British out, and now you've got the bankers in.
Big Brother. Mainstream media.
Government cover-ups.
Government cover-ups.
You want answers?
You want answers?
So does he.
Well, so does he.
He's Richie Allen.
He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
And now,
live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Richie's with us till 20 after. Then I'll continue with your calls. I'm going to get into the preparations for economic collapse that are tied in to this article with Lord Rothschild. I want to, in the next segment, briefly have him talk about Greece, Ireland, other countries being conquered by the bankers, his take on that, where Ukraine's going. Right now with Richie Allen, let's go back to the calls. Matt in Washington, D.C., you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hey, first point I just wanted to say was I called into NPR, and it was really easy to get on air and make some good, libertarian perspective points. And they actually commented on it for a little while.
Did you get into national NPR or local?
Yeah, it was Diane Ream's show. It was nationally syndicated.
Well, all of them have huge audiences because it's the only liberal media that actually has audiences. And so that's one of the best things you can do. And the key is just going, when you call in with your voice, that means you're part of the cult. What were you able to say?
I just made the point that nobody knows what the net neutrality bill was, and they were saying that the companies were against it, and I was just challenging that perspective that we've never seen it, and sounded like every other case where more bureaucrats get involved and then go and work for the companies they were supposed to oversee.
Well, it must be really bad that they wouldn't testify to Congress and they won't release it. I mean, how obvious is that? What's your take on the pedo rings?
Well, I just think that it goes along with a lot of the human rights issues that's going on, where it's a culture of turning away from domination of a minority or the people who don't have a voice, And I just think that it comes from the fact that people, when they start turning away from these animal domination, the fact that people eat and consume animals, it makes it a lot easier to turn away from human domination. And I just wanted to get your take on whether or not you think that it gets harder to, or it's easier to turn away from things like that when you.
No, I hear you. I mean, if we're like eating animals and doing all this, then why is it okay, to do that when we claim we care about life? I mean, I get your perspective. Let me talk to Richie Allen and get his take. Richie?
I love the way you dumped that one on me, Alex. I'm a red blood.
Yeah, but you're co-hosting with us. That's how these long-form interviews go.
Absolutely right. Look, it's a really interesting point. I'm not going to try and dodge the question. I am a meat eater. I do my absolute best to make sure that the meat I eat is ethically farmed, that animals are properly taken care of. But it's an interesting point, and it's been expressed by people on programs I've presented before, and I do respect that opinion. But I eat white meat and fish, and I will continue to do so.
Well, let me break that down for people. I'm addicted to it, but I don't eat any processed garbage. I eat open-range eggs. I eat the highest quality when I can. So that and by when I can, I don't eat crap chicken full of antibiotics. I get the open-range stuff. Tastes better. It's like 3 times more. But as we buy more and more of it, it's creating a market. I'm seeing prices actually go down as we displace the antibiotic-filled torture cages that these chickens are in. McDonald's has announced they're going to be trying to get healthier chicken with no antibiotics. We see the pressure working. But I don't look down on those that have decided to be vegan. In fact, I respect them. I understand their perspective. Here's the issue. A bunny rabbit or a deer or a cow is a prey animal, and it has been eaten forever. I don't want to eat elephants or seals or lions or tigers or cats or dogs. They're not prey animals. I don't want to eat people. You don't see cows building starships. You don't see cows creating Beethoven. Now, that said, I have trouble. I've seen it ordered before, suckling pig. I don't like seeing a piglet come out to be eaten. But as long as they're killed humanely and taken care of, that is part of their existence. It's what's done in the natural order. Humans are omnivores. Our guts are built to be omnivores. We're meant to have maybe 10% meat. We do eat too much meat. It's full of crap. It's got a lot of problems. I'd be healthier if I cut way back. I've tried to, but I'm addicted. But here's another issue. They have major studies. Meat is associated with larger brain CC size, higher IQ, and brain development.
We are on the march. The empire is on the run. Alex Jones and the GCN Radio Network.
Well, we're talking about corruption in high places and the mindset, the MO of the globalist controllers. We know are super anti-human, anti-freedom. Richie Allen, syndicated radio host out of the UK. RichieAllenShow.com is our guest till the end of this segment. I'll continue with calls and get into the Rothschild news, other areas I haven't hit yet, and a bunch of breaking news. NBA launches feminist campaign to lecture men not doing enough housework, as if men somehow are lazy and bad. Again, the war on men accelerates. It's really a war on humanity to divide and conquer. A war on women is a war on men. A war on men is a war on women, and ultimately children. Richie Allen's our guest. Geopolitically, you wanted to briefly, before we go to calls, get into what's happening in Ukraine, which the financial conquering of Mario Draghi, where they install the leaders in places like Italy now, just unprecedented, where the banks install a Goldman Sachs Europe head as the president. No election needed.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. So you're in Europe, you're dealing with this. You've seen Ireland fight for independence, only to now go under EU domination, to be signed on to all this debt that's not yours. What's your take on that?
Well, it's horrendous, Alex. I've said time and time again over the years that every prime minister or every finance minister of a European country who back in the 1990s signed on to the single currency, the euro, every one of them should be in jail for treason for the rest of their lives. Because what they effectively did was sold the sovereignty of all of those countries down the river. And those countries were no longer responsible for their own money supply and were basically being supplied money by central banks, which didn't have any money. I won't waste your time. You've spent so many episodes, so many shows over the years explaining this to people, what it actually means. Those countries were then given money which didn't exist. The principal created, the interest never created, to get those countries up to their absolute necks in debt that could never be paid. And then they've come for the natural resources of our countries. It's unbelievable, Alex. And a recent guest on one of my programs, an Irish guy called Ben Gilroy, terrific activist in Ireland, Ben, he said, Richie, when they talk about the Troika, and for your viewers who don't know what the Troika is, it's the European institutions, it's the European Union, the European Central Bank, and effectively the International Monetary Fund. When they come to your country to demand assets in return for debts that you can't pay, the Troika isn't the European Central Bank, the IMF, and the European Union. It's actually Bechtel and Pepsi and McDonald's and all those corporations that we decry and we complain about on our programs. And Alex, you are 100% right. The ousting of Yanukovych was basically a grab by these same people for Ukraine. That's all it was, plain and simple. I mean, anybody arguing with that needs only know that Ukraine currently has a finance minister. You know who she is, Alex. She's a Chicago woman. She's a woman from Chicago being sent in there like Varoufakis has been in Greece. They think this guy in Greece is the Messiah. No, he ain't. He went to college in Texas. He's got links to the very banks that we just mentioned.
And notice immediately they sold out and went along with the EU debt deal. Yeah,
that's right. And we'll agree to take billions in aid from the European Union. Again, the same old story played out time and time again. Alex, you've had John Perkins on your shows over the years. I mean, come on, he spelled it out, John Perkins, in his book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. This has been their modus operandi for years. Swan in there, promise loads of money, growth, jobs, you know, independence, it's all going to work out well for you, but you can never pay that money back because the interest has never been created.
Plus, they create the money out of nothing. Then there's hundreds of conditions. You've got to give the globalist all the money back to their companies. You're not allowed to spend it like you want.
Correct. Worse again, it doesn't get any more corrupt. And then, like what's happened, you mentioned Ireland, Alex. We've given up in recent years to these companies, you know, masquerading as the Troika. We've given up our forestry, Alex. We've given up the little bit of natural fuel reserve we have. We've given up our water. It's unbelievable. These are things that can never be taken back. And it's just a grab. And you mentioned, again, I often take my lead from you and what you do. You're talking about the TTIP free trade agreement, and all these agreements are supposed to bring everything up, you know, a rising tide lifts all ships. It's going to be great for all the poorer countries in the world. It isn't, Alex. It's just going to get those countries deeper and deeper into the pockets of the cabal and of those corporations. It's theft in broad daylight is what it is. And I mean, how many times have you said it this week on InfoWars, last week? You know, 500 people or 150 people in the world owning more than half of the world's assets. Alex, come on, you know. How much longer are people going to take this?
Exactly. They're always saying it's the 1%. It's actually a couple hundred people have half the world's wealth. And it's those very ultra-rich that want to get rid of the middle class. I mean, even 2 years ago, Rolling Stone had the headline, Matt Taibbi, everything is rigged, the biggest price-fixing scandal ever. We now know the interest rates are rigged. We now know the stock market's rigged. This is all admitted. That's what's so crazy. Since I first got on air 20 years ago and others did, back then they wouldn't admit all this. Now it's just all admitted. Is that a victory? Or are they just trying to normalize it all and say, okay, you're going to expose us? How about we just put all the dirty laundry out? Good luck digging through the mountain that we just dumped on your head.
Alex, do you know what must be very frustrating for guys like you and David Icke and Jim Marrs? And you've always been the three that I've gone to over the years. You've now, I think, succeeded in educating massive amounts of people about what's going on. Of course, the next step is to get them to do something about it. I think you're winning the information war. You're winning the info war, Alex. But what are they going to do? It's what people are going to do with that information. That's the next big challenge. Well, are they going to sit on their bums and do nothing about it? Or are they going to do something about it, which is get up, which is march, which is campaign? That's what they got to do now. You've won that war, my friend.
We've won that war together. We are starting to win that war, and I agree. It's about going and talking to your parliament, going and talking to your Congress, going and talking to your local legislature, letting them know, hey, I know the score, other people do, and that gives them the moral courage to then step up. And then when somebody steps up and doesn't even go all the way but does the right thing, you've got to then back them. Because so many times we get politicians to do the right thing, and then when they get trouble, we turn on them. No, we've got to then back people once we've made them our champions. Let's go to some more calls. Mama in Oregon, thanks for holding. You're on the air.
Yes, thank God for Richie Allen and Alex Jones.
Oh, you're a sweetheart. What's your point, ma'am?
Yes, all the reports now that are coming out about the pedophilia.
Yes.
We also have to think about the unreported. Okay? Just like you said, you had trouble believing all of this in the beginning, but there's so much that's going unreported. And then if it is, it's destroyed. You know, they're destroying the family and our future. The pedophilia is ancient evil on earth, and it's attacking our spirits. It's destroying our future by destroying our children. And we've got to start informing the children who the enemy is, what the evil is, and we've got to warn them, arm them, and support them.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. Is that they tell parents, don't tell your children about evil, don't tell them about corruption, tell them the government's good. Kids, when they're little, are ready to learn the basic archetypes of good and evil. We need to be warning our children, even though it's scary, and teaching them about the New World Order, teaching them about oppressors, teaching them about abusers. That's, in fact, top psychologists have come out and said the TSA groping of children is pedophile training. God bless you, caller from Oregon, Mama. Comments on that, Richie Allen?
I'm guessing that Mama, like you, Alex, is a parent. I'm not a parent yet. I hope Caroline, that's my fiance, and I hope we have children sometime. It's especially horrible and hurtful thing for parents. I can only imagine it. I've worked with children over the years as a soccer coach. I've got young child relatives, and children are beautiful, you know. And she's right to get upset there. It's very difficult for me not to become upset. When you think about it,
it makes me. Well, once you become a parent, you have violent thoughts when you even think about it. And I'm not a violent person, but it's just when I think about people hurting kids, it's just my instinct is to bash their brains out.
Yeah, I can only imagine, Alex. All I can say to Mama is, look, things are coming out now, you know, because of programs like this, because of programs like mine, because of David. God love David Icke writing that book in 1998, you know, and taking all the abuse he did for doing that. It's in people's faces now, Mama, and that's the start, that, you know. And I like to think that because even the mainstream have no choice now but to report on it, that might make children who might have been in danger next week and next month, maybe they won't be. I think we're going to get somewhere with this, you know, I really do.
All right, Richie Allen, we're out of time. I know you've got to go. We got Cranky Canadian and others coming up after this break, but we'll have you back again soon. Godspeed. We really appreciate you and knowing there's other great people out there like you.
It was an honor, Alex. Thank you very much for having me on. And like I said, mate, you have inspired thousands of people to do what I've done, which is to get away from the mainstream media where I started into making the programs. You were one of the first to do it, my friend, and I'm absolutely in debt to you. Thank you.
Well, Richie, we appreciate you. There goes Richie Allen. Yeah, he used to host 5-6 years ago. I'd go on a show routinely, a big mainline broadcast radio, and then he started a cable channel and does a bunch of other stuff. Very exciting to see that going on, because that's my main goal, is to inspire other men and women who are just as smart, just as strong, and in some cases more so than I am, to fight. I'm just here to defeat the globalist. That's all I want.